Our vision is to encourage, equip, and empower every Christian in the workplace to feel confident in their calling and connected to others in their organisation, sector, and city in order to transform society. One of the biggest challenges for Christians is that we can often think of ministry as relating only to activities we do in or for the church. In fact, being in ministry is often seen as the highest calling that a Christian can have, with everything else perhaps seen as less important. But most Christians aren't in full-time ministry, so is that the right way of seeing things? In this edition of PEP Talk, the Persuasive Evangelism podcast from Solas, we are exploring witnessing in the workplace. I'm Simon Wenham, and I'm joined by my irrepressible colleague, Gavin Matthews. Gavin, how are you?
I was about to say I'm doing okay, but I'm kind of stifling a sneeze. It's that kind of it's pollen season. So if I kind of suddenly explode all over the microphone, apologies to you and listeners.
Okay, well, hopefully that won't happen. But before we come to our guests, actually, it'd be lovely just to hear from you, Gavin, because I know this is an important topic for you particularly. Can you just say a little bit more about why that is?
Yeah, because we were working last year with a tour around Scotland called Thrive 25, which is about trying to promote Christian workplace groups, to get Christians together to get a bit better at sharing their faith, being visible for Christ in the workplace. And it seems like such an important area for us all. And also there are so many good stories around the country of people doing amazing work in insurance companies and doctors' practices and hospitals and councils, but the rest of the church don't know. So part of telling that good story is part of what we should be involved in. So I think it's important.
Great, thank you. And that's also a very nice link to our guest today, who actually we became connected to through Thrive, because he is on the advisory board of the Thrive network, and there's going to be one this year and next year, so do look out for that. He is Gideon Okoli, a project manager and marketing strategist. Gideon, welcome to PEP Talk. But before we start, could you perhaps just say a little bit about your own background and how you got involved in evangelism in the first place?
Thank you. Thank you, Simon. So for me, I grew up from a Christian home. I've had parents that will always, ensure that you get to church. But I found Christ for myself when I got into the higher institution. It's different when you are in an environment and, based on, your parents taking you to church and then getting you involved. And then you come to a point where you're like, what should my life look like? So I got into the higher institution, and then that was when I found that moment. It was just that, because for me, it was first that opportunity to live life, because it was my first opportunity outside of home. But then I somehow believe that my parents' prayers and their investment from my early stages didn't allow me go that route, because I really wanted to. I remember I got into school, the very first week I bought this polo, and then the inscription on the polo was "Born Sinner." Like, I really wanted to live life, because I'm like, this is it for me. But somehow God just, changed that appetite from an experience in church. I attended a Sunday service, and then the pastor was quite, focused on helping us, focused on the sermon that day was really about what life should look like for us, what God has created for us, how God wants to see us live our life on earth. And that hit me deeply. And that was when the entire journey started. From that moment, I joined the choir. I sang in church for a while. After that experience, I joined the media team because I was really interested in media. And then my pastor took interest in me, and then he asked me to work with him as a support staff. So I was studying at the time. I was going with him to functions, to different events. And of course, being around the pastor just modeled my life, and it's just been that way for me up until today.
That's lovely. It's really nice to see you again on the screen after having met you on the Thrive thing. Now, in a minute or two, we're going to talk about what it means to be a Christian in the workplace. But before we kind of get into that, tell us, what is your workplace? What do you do for a living? And what are the kind of pressures, challenges that you face in your work? And what gives you job satisfaction in the work that you do Monday to Friday?
Okay, so right now I'm in the middle of a transition process. Up until the end of January, I was working with an arm of Balmoral Group as a project manager. So we delivered the new Skylight restaurant at the Markleaf Hotel, and then we commissioned that in January. Afterwards, but before that time, I am one person that I live by the nudge I get in my spirit. I felt like the time was up for every other engagement. I didn't get clarity on what next to do, so I enrolled for a mini MBA program, which I started in February. But while I was just about starting the program, God dropped a thought in my heart, which is the current project I'm currently invested in now, which is Nexa, which is the car wash project. I was just driving off to go get my car washed one of those Saturday afternoons, and I'm like, I spend about an hour, 30 minutes every weekend just trying to get my car washed. I presume that must be the case for several other professionals. How can we build something that can help people reclaim that time back? And that's how the entire, journey started. So that's where I'm pretty much invested in right now.
Brilliant, thank you. We were just discussing beforehand how I also find getting my car washed that's slightly frustrating because of the time commitments. That's really interesting that you're obviously trying to help people have more time to themselves. We've had quite a few guests on PEP Talk over the years who've been involved with workplace ministries. Ros Loker, Jim Grimmer, those are both episodes you can hear elsewhere.
Yeah.
Do your colleagues know about your faith in Jesus? Are you still wearing the T-shirt, or and how do you bring up topics like speaking about your faith or trust in Jesus?
I don't wear that T-shirt anymore. I've now changed. It's for me, Jesus Christ, the living hope. That's it every day, every now and then. So yeah, my colleague know my faith. Like I put it up front. While I was working with Balmoral Group, I remember one of those days I kind of try to spark these conversations. Because first, it begins with delivering your job excellently. So that's where it starts from. When you get to points where you can, your colleagues see that you are full on, you get the job done. Like you are not, there's no gap, there's no loophole in what you're trying to do. That becomes like the basis of the conversation. And then as I work with contractors, with suppliers and tradesmen, I just kind of spark that conversation. I'm like, what's your weekend like? What do you do on weekends? Because that's pretty much, the first place to have, the time where people get to commit themselves to faith. And then, from that moment, I discovered one of the contractors on site used to attend my church, King. So I'm like, so what happened? Why have you not been attending church? Oh, I got into this relationship, and then my girlfriend was this and that. And you know how Westerners can be, very private about their conversations. And then you're like, okay, that's fine. But I'd love to see you in church anytime soon. They're like, oh, where do you? I said, I worship at King's too. And then that's how the conversation gets on. I remember speaking to one of the directors on site, and I was like, oh, I like how you do stuff. Are you a Christian? He said, no, I'm not a Christian. I said, but you act like you're one. He said, no, I'm not a Christian. I'm not a Jesus thing. I'm not. I don't do Jesus. I'm like, okay, that's fine. But you just keep looking out for little opportunities to just have that conversation, because you never will have the moment where you are allowed to speak Christ at the place of work, but you just take advantage of every little friendly, casual talk to just chip it in, and then it leaves the mark on the heart. And then when I after that conversation, I go back, I'm just praying about them, like, God, we've just sown the seed, do the work. My job is to sow the seed, just get the work done and get these guys to and that's how it's been for me.
Mm-hmm. I know when we met you at Thrive, you were talking about kind of the threefold approach that you take to being visible for Jesus in the workplace. And that the first thing you kind of touched on in your last answer actually was about sort of pursuing excellence in your work.
Absolutely.
So why is pursuing excellence in your work important as a Christian? And I know some people talk about their work as if it's only a place to share Jesus, as if the work itself didn't matter. So why is pursuing excellence in the work itself? Why does that matter to God, and why does that matter as part of your witness for Him?
Yeah, so that picked up from the Antioch experience, where they saw the believers and they acted like that's where the Christian conversation started. This is who Christ is. They acted Christ-like, and they were called Christians. So the question now is, if I'm a Christian and I don't want to say I'm a Christian up front, do I have the right characteristics at my place of work? Am I delivering as Jesus would, as one that is seen to be the excellent person? So that's how we start.
Excellent.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, are you therefore saying that has sparked conversations? Are you saying people can then, we'll ask you questions about why are you doing this like that. I mean, is that, are you experiencing that? Are people seeing something different in you as a result?
Not literally. People don't get to ask you about your faith because of the quality of your service in the place of work. But the quality of your service in the place of work helps you build certain relationships that you can leverage on to have other conversations, and that's how it starts. Because nobody would say, "Jen, I've not had that experience," or "I would love to know, are you doing this because you are a Christian?" I've never had that kind of experience before. But what happens is because I have delivered excellently on certain bids, you now have just moved from just being a transactional colleague to building some sort of relationship. And that relationship becomes the bedrock of every other conversation that you build on. And that's how it's always happened for me.
We hope that you are enjoying today's discussion about evangelism. But did you know that Solas also produces a wide range of digital resources to help you share the gospel in the online spaces you inhabit? Short reels, 1-minute shorts for Instagram and Snapchat, delivering the gospel helpfully and in tune with the way that people want to receive it today. 5-minute short answer videos, perfect for Facebook, and online blogs and church websites, and more. And it's all there for you to use at our website. Come and have a look at solas-cpc.org. And now, back to the program.
So with this approach that you're suggesting, I was wondering who inspires you to do that?
So you see, there has always been this guiding mantra for me, and that is the fact that God doesn't just call people, he positions them. And if you understand positioning, you will not miss if you don't understand positioning, you will misinterpret your calling. There are a couple of characters in the Bible that I use to guide myself as a marketplace apostle. For example, Joseph didn't preach sermons. He managed an economy as a chief strategist. Daniel did not pastor any church. He advised kings as an executive coach. Esther did not lead worship. She influenced governments. Nehemiah did not travel as an evangelist. He rebuilt infrastructure. Lydia wasn't running a ministry team. She was a businesswoman, a global trader funding the kingdom. These guys were not second-tier believers. They were not less spiritual. They were not waiting for the ministry to come to them. The challenge we see in today's world is that we celebrate platforms, but God is looking for placement. And unfortunately, we have been taught to value visibility more than impact. If we see this the other way around, we will deliver more value in our workplaces.
And then the second thing you've spoken about, after talking about excellence in work, the second thing you talked a lot about was developing, really sort of significant relationships with colleagues. And it's those relationships through which the love of God is transmitted. So how can we build better relationships with people that we work alongside? Because so often conversations don't get past the weather in Scotland, right? We don't get past the weather. We talk about it all the time. Or football, if you're lucky. How do we get to develop relationships that count, to have conversations that really matter?
Okay, so in my own experience, it's always been about not focusing on transactional conversations, because most leaders are always about the job, the targets, the budget, and all that. But when I deal with people, when I relate with my colleagues, it's always about how are you? That's where the conversation is always. How are you? What's going on in your life? If I've got that minute, like, talk to me about this. Do you need help? Is this something we can talk about? Would you want me to come around? Will I be resourceful? Can I pray with you? That's always about that relationship. Because at that point, it's not always, because even yesterday I was speaking with a colleague, a co-founder, and she was like, oh, they've got this applications to do, this lawyer to do. And when I got on the call, she was like, let's talk about work. I said, no, I didn't call you to talk about work. I called you to talk about you. Right? And we started from them like, I'm with you on this. If you need support, I'm ready to support you. If you need prayers, happy to commit some time to pray for you about this. If you need finance, even it gets to that point. If you need some money, just let me know, whatever I have, because you get to that point where people no longer see you as a colleague. They now see you as a brother. And that is where you can have these conversations.
And that's a lovely way of putting it, isn't it? I think a lot of problems in this world is that we do see, or at least a lot of politics seems to be very transactional. Life is just a transaction. There's a price. And as you say, sort of developing much deeper relationships. You touched upon it there. You also, the third part of what you've said, your approach to evangelism is praying for colleagues. Can you say a little bit more about how that works, and what sorts of things are you praying about?
So I'll tell you this. I spend a bulk part of my prayer time praying in tongues, because I believe strongly that in my head, this understanding that there's nothing I want to ask God for that God doesn't know I need, right? So if He knows everything I need, I'll rather than ask God for that thing, I just begin to declare and proclaim that, receiving that item. But then when I start praying in my wisdom, I have very few words to say. I have very little to say, so I spend time praying. So if I go back a few months when I was at the Markleaf, I joined the Markleaf as a night porter sometime in 2024 while I was sometime about that time while I was still working with Kings on a part-time role. So because I work at nights, I have that liberty to have like hands-free items, my earpiece. I put on certain songs and I pray sometimes 2-3 hours into the night. And it happens every other night I'm working. I wouldn't say that I am praying for this specific thing about the hotel, but I'm praying within the hotel. I'm praying to God about the hotel. I'm praying to God about my life. And then before I knew what was happening, we started hearing conversations about the Markleaf being sold to Balmoral Group. And then that was like how things began to spiral up. And then I remember one of those nights in the place of prayer, I had God speak to me and saying that you are a project manager. Several projects are about to kick off within this environment here. Have you tried to have a conversation with the leadership about them? I never would have thought about it, because we had other guys that were working that probably could have done a better job. And there and then, I just sat down, took up the system then, put together an application letter, sent it through to the MD, and before I knew it, by the next month, I was working within that same establishment as a project manager. So the thing is, you never know what God is flying around you, but if you spend time in the place of prayers, God will, by default, direct your step into what He is designed for you. The same goes for even the project we're working on just now. So prayer is that one part of me that I spend so much time praying about things, praying about life, praying about, opportunities, praying about the will of God. And that for me is like the biggest part of it, because I'm like, there's a lot going on that it takes almost this just for you to get off track. But when you spend time in the place of prayer, it directs your step and it leads you.
Yeah, and that probably makes you more courageous, I would have thought, as a Christian, if you're coming from the presence of God. Because I know when we talk about people being visible for Jesus at work, whether it's at a shop or a factory or a call center or whatever, a lot of Christians feel quite anxious. So if someone's listening to this and they're feeling kind of a stirring with them, yes, I need to step up, I need to be a bit more visible for Jesus in my workplace, what would you advise them to do? Where would you advise somebody to start if they've never spoken up for Jesus at work before, but they want to take those first tentative steps? What advice would you give them?
So my advice in a workplace will always be to begin with the place of value-added delivery. That's how it begins. You are employed for a purpose. The workplace is God has put you there for, to add value to that space. God didn't call you into that place of work to preach Christ directly. He called you that place of work to first add value, and then through the value, see, when your light shines so light that when your light shines, people, they begin to see other aspects of God in you. So that would be my first recommendation. Focus on value creation. Be that one guy or that one lady that when when your manager or the directors are talking about a unit, they can single you out as that one person that contributes effectively to the organization. And then the second is to build relationships beyond your work as much as you can. The concept of transformational leadership should be your guiding course. So as you relate to people, relate with them with the intention, with the what's the word now? So there's this decision to say, I want to impact the next person. Have that at the back of your mind. I just want to work with you and then just get off once 5 o'clock out and everyone goes on. That is the next bit, and then the last bit, which of course is the bit I always try to put my invest more in, is prayers. I don't just pray because I want to pray. I pray because I have sown seeds. Sowing seed is the first step. Watering that seed and trusting the Holy Spirit to guide their heart that's the part I have no control over. So I use prayers to get that done, and then these are like the three processes I would recommend for anyone trying to preach Christ within the workplace.
And practically speaking, then, if you're you mentioned obviously building up relationships. So for those, because I think some people are wary of, am I allowed to say certain things about my faith in the workplace? Are there certain rules? Are you saying that you obviously focus on doing excellent work, you build up those relationships, and then, for example, actually speaking about your faith, would that be something that you do as sort of outside of work, or are you saying there are ways of doing it in work, or is it, how do you navigate that, given that obviously you have to be careful in some work settings? And I think sometimes Christians are worried about sort of saying the wrong thing or damaging relationships or getting in trouble, perhaps.
Yeah, so there's always going to be a huge need for emotional intelligence and environmental intelligence. You are understanding the environment you find yourself and the emotions within the room that you're having that conversation. I definitely would not recommend having conversation in the workplace within work times about faith. But there are always like break times, like back at Markleaf, we'll have that 30 minutes break where it's a loose time. It's your time. It's not work time because you're not there. So these are moments where you sit around the table, you're trying to have lunch, and in trying to have lunch, you're having conversation like, so what's been going on? What's happening? Oh, this, oh, that, oh, really? How did you manage this? And then maybe you come in the next day, you're like, oh yeah, you said something happened the previous day. Have you been able to sort it out? You are trying to bring back, a previous conversation, and that shows that you care. And then people begin to open up to you because they now see that you care. Do you need help with this? Can I help with this? Or maybe sometimes I close from work and I'm just about driving off. I see my colleague trying to walk up the bus stop. I'm like, where do you stay? Can I drop you off? These little acts of kindness, they help people open up. And then in the process of trying to drop the colleague off at work, you're having conversation off at home. You're having other conversations about life generally. Oh, how about this? So what are you going to do for the weekend? Would you like to come around for dinner? These things, it's not always the case for everyone. It's dependent on how you're led, and also on how much relationship you have built with the person you are speaking to. Because you also want to be careful. You don't want to, open up your vulnerability to everyone or let people, get too vulnerable around you. You want to mind that too. So it's important that you are emotionally sensitive. You are environmentally aware of what is being said, of what signals you're sending out before you make this,
And so, in this whole process of being visible for Jesus in work, you've kind of outlined doing excellence in work, pursuing deep relationships with people, and investing in prayer. So that raises the spiritual temperature, brings Jesus onto the agenda. How have people kind of reacted to that? Has it been aggression or apathy or actual interest in your faith from people alongside you?
Okay, so I've had positive responses to these relationships, and I've also had I don't want to go there. Let's end it. You have that. Yeah. I've had that experience. I don't want to talk about Jesus. I'm like, oh, really? Why? I'm sorry, I just don't want to talk about him. I'm like, oh, that's fine. That's okay. And then you just move on to other conversations, and you just keep things going because ultimately, our lives as marketplace apostles is a compendium of every other thing we do outside the church, much more than what we say. So our ability to understand that within the confines of our workplace, we are apostles by way of our action. We are apostles by way of our character. We are apostles by way of the relationships we build. We are apostles by way of our delivery, much more than we are apostles by way of speaking, of preaching, as they call it, as it happens in church. So that's really around how we manage that.
I really like that concept of marketplace apostles. I think we'd all be quite different in work if we went into it, thinking in that mindset. Yeah. This is what I am, as opposed to whatever our job is. I wondered if you could just say a little bit about, let's say someone's listening, they could be in an office, council, school, shop, factory. They want to take a first step. You've given some great advice. are there resources or places that they can find out more to help them do workplace evangelism?
Yes, yes. One of the resources I find really helpful is Transform Work. I have been with it. We have like some WhatsApp group where you have these conversations, and also the Business Connection. We've got the Thrive event. We've got the Morning Breakfast. You just be around this environment and interact with fellow believers, and then you see yourself, climbing up.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you so much for that. We will put links to all of those places you mentioned, Gideon, in the show notes for this program. So if anybody's interested in Transform Work or Thrive or Business Connect, all that stuff, look in the show notes at the end. There'll be links directly through to all of that. Thank you so much for joining us, Gideon. That's been really helpful and encouraging. I want to wrap it up with 3 quotes that come from the Lausanne Movement website. Listen to this one to start with. 90,000 hours. This refers to the average amount of time a person spends in work in his or her lifetime. As this translates to roughly a third of a person's lifetime, the Christian's presence at work presents itself as the most natural and at the same time most overlooked opportunity to evangelize the world. And Bishop Ephraim Tendero of the World Evangelical Alliance said, in order to fulfill the Great Commission, every believer needs to be a minister and every workplace a place of ministry. And then finally, famous quote, Billy Graham said, I believe that one of the next great moves of God is going to be through believers in the workplace. So this is important stuff. Thank you for being our guide through all of it today, Gideon. It's much appreciated. We value your time. Thank you so much. And thank you, Simon. And goodbye, everybody. We'll see you again in a fortnight.